I still can't believe I'm telling you this, but the way I met Jamie was because he slipped me his number in my sandwich, like literally tucked it right inside the bread. I mean, who does that? But let me back up a bit, because if you knew me, you'd get why this little deli encounter turned out to be way more than just a lunch order. So I work in a pretty mundane office job downtown. Cubicles, spreadsheets, the usual. And every weekday around noon, my stomach starts yelling at me to do something about it. There's this tiny deli, a couple blocks from my office, a hole-in-the-wall spot that's been there forever, called Marty's. It's nothing fancy, just your classic greasy counter and old-school menu boards. But the sandwiches? Honestly, they're the kind that make you forget about the stress of the day for a second. Now, I'm pretty routine about my order. A turkey and provolone on rye, hold the mayo, extra pickles. Nothing weird, nothing too complicated, just comfort food. And every day, it seemed like the same guy was behind the counter, slicing meat with this effortless precision that made me think he must have done this for years. He had this quiet, easy smile, dark hair that always looked a little tousled, and these sharp eyes that caught yours when he talked. I never caught his name, just called him Deli Guy in my head. One Thursday, I was running late, already half dreading the mountain of emails waiting for me back at my desk. I swung by Marty's, hoping to grab my usual and get back before anyone noticed I'd been gone too long. Jamie, that's his name, I finally learned, was working the counter as usual. He greeted me with that same easy smile and asked if I wanted the usual. I nodded, too tired to say much else. What happened next was kind of surreal. I paid, grabbed the sandwich, and started walking back to the office when I felt something tucked inside the paper wrapping. Curious, I peeled it open at my desk, and there it was, a small, neatly folded piece of paper with a phone number and a little note just saying, "Call me." At first, I thought maybe it was a joke or some kind of prank. I mean, who slips their number into a sandwich? But the handwriting was neat, almost careful, and honestly, it made me smile in a way I hadn't in weeks. The thing is, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to call. I hadn't been on a date in, well, forever, and the idea of texting a stranger felt kind of weird. But there was something about Jamie's quiet confidence and that unexpected note that stuck with me all day. I kept wondering what he was like beyond that deli counter. So yeah, here I am, telling you all this because sometimes the weirdest little moments turn out to be the start of something you didn't see coming. And honestly, I never thought a sandwich could change my life. But it did. I stared at that little slip of paper for what felt like ages, my mind going in circles. Was this some kind of pickup line? The deli version of sliding into DMs? Honestly, I was more used to awkward Tinder chats than this old school move. But the way Jamie had handed me my sandwich, a flicker of something genuine in his eyes, it made me think maybe this was different. I didn't text him right away. Days passed. Every time I grabbed lunch at Marty's, I'd catch myself glancing at the counter, hoping to see him again. And he was there, same quiet smile, same easy way of moving behind the slicer. The deli felt different now. Less just a place to grab food. More like some sort of low-key stage for this little story I wasn't ready to tell yet. Finally, on a slow Tuesday afternoon, I found myself reaching for my phone during a coffee break. I stared down the number, thumb hovering over the keyboard, fingers stiff. It was just a number on paper, but it might as well have been a secret code to some new world I wasn't sure I was ready to step into. Then I typed out a simple message. "Hey, it's the guy from the deli." I'm the turkey and provolone guy. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed. "Hey, Jamie here. Hope that sandwich survived the trip back okay." I laughed out loud, texting a deli clerk and actually getting a response. I felt like I was back in high school. We started texting back and forth that afternoon. Nothing crazy, just little jokes, questions about the menu, a few shared complaints about work. But there was something easy about it. Like talking to a friend you just happened to meet in the weirdest way possible. A couple days later, Jamie suggested, "Want to meet for coffee sometime?" I promise I'm more than just sandwich guy. I almost chickened out. But instead, I said yes. When I got to the little coffee shop Jamie suggested, my heart was doing this weird fluttery thing. I spotted him immediately. He wasn't behind a counter this time, just standing there in a casual sweatshirt, hair messier than usual, looking a little nervous. Or maybe that was just me projecting. "Hey," he said, his voice quieter than I imagined, but warm. "Hey," I replied, suddenly feeling way too aware of how my hands were sweating. We ordered coffee and found a booth by the window. The conversation flowed easier than I expected. Jamie told me about how he'd started working at Marty's while going to school for culinary arts. He didn't want to just be a deli clerk forever. There was this whole other side of him that dreamed about cooking in real restaurants, maybe even someday opening his own place. I told him about my office job, the monotony, and how I always felt like I was stuck in a loop. He nodded like he really understood, like he'd been there too. "You know," he said, stirring his coffee, "I wasn't sure if you'd call. Honestly, slipping my number into your sandwich felt like the last-ditch move for me. I'm glad it worked." I smiled, feeling a little flush creep up my neck. Yeah, it worked. As the afternoon turned to evening, the coffee shop started to empty out. Neither of us wanted to leave, but real life was calling. Jamie walked me back to my office building, and just before we parted ways, he surprised me. "Maybe I can make you a sandwich sometime. The non-deli kind," he said, grinning. I laughed. "I'd like that." That night, as I lay in bed, I kept replaying the day in my head. The way Jamie's eyes lit up when he talked about food, the quiet way he listened, and that unexpected note tucked inside my sandwich. It was silly, but suddenly, Mondays didn't feel so bad. There was something waiting for me beyond the 9-to-5 grind, beyond the daily rush. Something real. I didn't know where this was going yet, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. After that coffee date, things started moving at their own pace, slow but steady. We texted almost every day, sometimes about nothing important, sometimes about things that felt like they mattered. Jamie would send me pictures of the crazy sandwiches he'd make when experimenting after his shifts, and I'd tell him about little office disasters or funny stuff that happened at work. It felt natural, like we'd known each other way longer than we actually had. One Friday, he asked if I wanted to come by his place for dinner. He promised to cook me something that wasn't just deli stuff. I was nervous because, honestly, I wasn't used to dating anyone or inviting anyone into my personal space for that matter. But I said yes. When I showed up, his apartment was exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd spent years working food service but was also trying to be creative. A tiny kitchen crammed with spices, cookbooks stacked on every surface, and a couple of plants perched on the windowsill. Jamie was there, chopping vegetables with purposeful ease, wearing an old band tee and those loose sweatpants that somehow made him look both chill and focused at the same time. "Hey," he said, looking up and flashing that familiar small smile. "Hey," I said, trying not to stare too much at the way his hands moved around the knife like they belonged in a cooking show. We cooked together, while mostly I chopped some garlic clumsily while he directed me with a patient grin. The kitchen filled with the smells of garlic and fresh herbs, and for a little while, the normal chaos of my life felt miles away. Over dinner, a ridiculously good risotto with roasted vegetables, we talked about everything from the dumbest movies we loved to the awkwardness of online dating. Jamie told me about his family, how his parents had taken a while to adjust after he came out, but they were getting there. I opened up about my own struggles, how I'd been out for years but still sometimes felt like I was hiding parts of myself at work or with friends. There was something about sitting across from him, sharing a meal he'd made, that made all the walls I'd built feel a bit less necessary. After dinner, we moved to the couch, and I realized I didn't want the night to end. We talked until the city outside grew quiet, and the soft light from the street lamps spilled through the windows. Then Jamie did something that surprised me. He reached out and took my hand, not in a dramatic way, just this simple, steady touch that said, "I'm here." My heart did that weird flip-flop thing again. I squeezed his hand back. "I'm glad you called," he said softly. "Me too," I admitted. Our first kiss was gentle, almost shy, but full of that kind of warmth that makes you forget everything else. It wasn't some Hollywood moment. It was real, imperfect, and exactly what I needed. In the weeks that followed, the deli became less just a lunch spot and more like our little in-joke. Jamie still worked there, but now there was a new layer underneath. The secret smiles, the quick texts during his shifts, the casual plans for weekends. One day, I caught him looking at me from behind the counter, this little smile playing on his lips. When I raised an eyebrow, he shrugged like it was no big deal. "Just thinking about that sandwich I made you," he said. "Yeah? What about it?" He leaned over the counter, voice low enough for only me to hear. That number in there, it was the start of something good. I felt that same warm rush again and smiled back. But even as things felt good, I knew it wasn't going to be all easy. Jamie's dream of culinary school was pulling him in one direction, and my job, well, it was comfortable but kind of stuck. I wasn't sure where this would all lead, but for the first time, I was okay with not knowing. Because sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places, like a number slipped into a sandwich at a tiny deli downtown. The thing about Jamie was, as much as he was this laid-back, easygoing guy at the deli, there was this fire underneath. I could see it when he talked about his culinary dreams, or when he stayed up late practicing recipes and techniques on his tiny stove. I admired that, even if I wasn't sure how it would fit with my predictable 9-to-5 routine. One evening, a couple weeks after that dinner at his place, we met up at Marty's after my shift. The shop was quieter than usual, the evening rush mostly done, and Jamie was behind the counter, slicing meat with that same precise rhythm I'd come to recognize. He looked up when I walked in, and his whole face lit up. "Hey," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. "Got a minute?" "Sure," I said, sliding onto one of the stools at the counter. Jamie leaned in, lowering his voice a little, like he was about to share a secret. "So, I got accepted into this culinary program. It starts next month. It's full-time, which means I might have to cut back on deli hours." My stomach did this weird twist. I'd known this was coming, but hearing it out loud made it feel more real. Part of me was thrilled for him. He deserved this chance. But another part was selfish. What would that mean for us? For the easy rhythm we'd found? "Wow," I said after a beat, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's amazing. You've worked so hard for this." He smiled, but there was a flicker of worry in his eyes. "Yeah, but it's going to be tough. I might not see you as much, and scheduling's going to be a nightmare." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "We'll figure it out. I'm not going anywhere." Jamie reached over and squeezed my hand. "I know. That's why I wanted to tell you in person. After that night, things definitely shifted." Jamie's schedule was a mess. Classes during the day, homework and practice in the evenings. I tried to be understanding, but I won't lie. There were times I felt like I was back to being just another guy grabbing a sandwich instead of someone he cared about. One Saturday, I showed up at Marty's, hoping to catch him for a quick lunch, but the place was packed, and Jamie was nowhere to be found behind the counter. I asked the manager, who told me Jamie had a class that day and wouldn't be back until late. I wandered outside, feeling a mix of disappointment and loneliness. It wasn't like I expected everything to stay perfect, but it stung to have that disconnect creeping in. That night we texted, and Jamie apologized for being distant. I could tell he felt guilty about it. "I hate that I'm so busy," he wrote. "I want to be better at this." "At us," I replied. "I get it. I'm proud of you. Just don't forget about me." We kept texting like that for a while. Honest, sometimes messy conversations about time and priorities and how to keep us afloat. Then one evening, Jamie surprised me. He invited me to a small event at his school, a tasting night where students got to showcase dishes they'd created. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I said yes. The school was this modest, bustling kitchen filled with the scent of herbs and freshly baked bread. Jamie greeted me with that same nervous energy I'd seen in his eyes when he was cooking for me. He led me to a table where his dish was set, a beautifully plated seared duck breast with a cherry reduction and roasted root vegetables. I took a bite, and honestly, it was the best thing I'd ever tasted. The flavors were rich and surprising, but there was this care in every element that made it feel personal. "Wow," I said, looking at him in awe. He shrugged with a smile. "Thanks. It's what I've been working on." That night, after the event, we walked through the quiet streets, the city lights casting a soft glow. "See?" he said, nudging me gently. "I'm serious about this. I want you to be part of it." "I want that too," I said, feeling something settle in my chest. We stopped outside my building, and for the first time in a while, the future didn't feel so uncertain. It felt like maybe, just maybe, we could figure this out together, even if it meant juggling messy schedules and tough decisions. Jamie leaned in, and our kiss this time was different, stronger, more sure. It was a promise without words. As I went inside, I realized that sometimes the best relationships aren't about everything being easy. They're about wanting to stay, even when things get complicated. And honestly, I was more than ready to stick around. The next few weeks felt like walking a tightrope. Jamie's classes were intense, early mornings, late nights, and weekends packed with homework or practice. Meanwhile, I was still catching my usual grind at the office, but every so often, I'd catch myself watching the clock, wondering what he was up to, or if he was getting enough sleep. It was weird how much you could miss someone after just a few days apart. One Thursday evening, after a long day at work, I texted Jamie to see if he wanted to grab a quick bite. I wasn't expecting much. He'd probably be swamped with school stuff. But to my surprise, he replied almost immediately, "I'm actually free tonight. Let's meet at that little taco place on 5th." I smiled reading that and told him I'd be there in 20 minutes. When I got there, Jamie was already waiting outside, casually leaning against the brick wall, looking tired but happy to see me. His hair was messier than usual, like he'd run his hands through it a dozen times, and there were faint smudges of flour on his sleeve. "Hey," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. "Hey yourself," I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the spicy salsa I was about to devour. We grabbed 2 tacos and found a bench in the nearby park. The city lights flickered on, and the air smelled like late summer. "So, how's school treating you?" I asked, digging into my food. "I'm learning a lot," he said, grinning a bit. "But man, it's brutal. I barely have time to breathe. Sometimes I worry I'm biting off more than I can chew." I laughed. Pun intended? Jamie rolled his eyes but smiled. "Maybe, but seriously, I'm stuck between loving it and feeling totally overwhelmed." I nodded, understanding more than he probably realized. "I get that. Work's been a lot lately too. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just going through the motions." There was a quiet moment where we both looked out over the city. Then Jamie reached over and took my hand. "Hey, I know it's crazy right now, but I don't want this to be just a phase or something we squeeze in between everything else. I want it to matter." I squeezed his hand back. "Me too. You mean more than I realized." That night, walking back to my apartment, I felt lighter. No matter how busy life got, those moments with Jamie made the chaos feel worth it. But the balancing act wasn't always smooth. A couple weeks later, Jamie had to cancel plans, not once, but twice, in the same weekend because of an unexpected assignment. I won't lie, I felt that familiar sting of disappointment, even if I understood why. On the second cancellation, I texted him, trying to keep it light. "You're turning into a ghost, deli guy." He replied quickly, "Sorry, man. I hate this. I wish I could clone myself." I wrote back, "I get it. Just don't forget, I'm here." Later that night, he called me. Hearing his voice felt like a balm. "I'm sorry I'm so flaky lately. Just feels like I'm drowning." I listened as he vented about the pressure, the expectations, the exhaustion. I didn't have any big solutions, but I told him, "You're not alone. We'll figure it out together." And we did, in our own imperfect way. One Saturday afternoon, Jamie surprised me by showing up at my place with a picnic basket. He had this goofy grin and was carrying a blanket. "Thought we could use a break," he said. We spent the day at the park, talking, laughing, eating the sandwiches Jamie had made that weren't even close to deli usual. It was simple, but it felt like reclaiming a little normalcy. As the sun set, Jamie looked at me and said, "I know this isn't easy, but you're the first person who's made me want to keep trying, even when everything's crazy." I smiled, feeling that warm buzz in my chest. "Same here." That night, as we said goodnight, Jamie whispered, "Thanks for sticking around." And I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be, with the deli clerk who dared to put his number in my sandwich, who'd somehow become the guy the first couldn't stop thinking about. After that picnic, something shifted between us. It wasn't like the world suddenly stopped spinning or anything, but the weight of Jamie's busy schedule felt a little less heavy when we were together. I think we both realized we were becoming more than just text messages and stolen moments between shifts and meetings. One Thursday night, a week or so after the picnic, I was on my way to meet Jamie after his class. I wasn't sure what to expect. Sometimes after those long days, he could be all smiles, other times completely wiped out. But that night, when I saw him waiting outside the school, his eyes caught mine with this spark I'd been hoping for. "Hey," he said softly, pulling me into a hug that felt like home. "Hey," I answered, feeling my nerves settle. We walked to a quiet nearby cafe, one of those places with mismatched chairs and fairy lights strung across the ceiling. Jamie ordered us both hot chocolate, and we found a small table in the corner. "So," I said, turning to him, "how's the new project coming along?" He sighed, taking a sip. "It's intense. We're supposed to do this multi-course dinner for a panel of chefs next week. It's huge, my chance to prove I belong there." I nodded, trying to imagine the pressure. "Sounds like a ton to juggle." Jamie looked down at his drink, then back up at me. "Yeah, and I guess I'm a little scared. What if I mess it up? What if I'm not as good as I thought?" I reached across the table and took his hand. "Jamie, you're one of the most talented people I know. You've got this." He smiled, but it was tinged with doubt. "Thanks." I needed to hear that. There was a pause. Then he leaned in closer. "You know, sometimes I wonder if I'm holding back, trying to keep everything together on my own." I shook my head. "You don't have to do that. Not with me." That night, as I walked him back to his apartment, the conversation stayed with me. I knew Jamie carried a lot on his shoulders, more than I'd realized. But I also knew that the fact he was willing to open up meant something. The week of the big dinner flew by in a blur of work and nerves. Jamie was almost a ghost at the deli. There 1 minute, gone the next, always exhausted but pushing himself. I tried to be as supportive as I could, sending texts packed with encouragement and reminders to eat or rest. On the night of the event, Jamie invited me to come along. It was held in this sleek, modern kitchen space with shiny stainless steel counters and bright overhead lights. The room buzzed with energy, chefs bustling, ingredients being prepped, judges arriving. Jamie was focused, but when he spotted me in the crowd, his face softened. He took a brief moment to squeeze my hand before heading back to his station. The dinner itself was a whirlwind. Courses came and went, flavors danced, and I watched Jamie work with a mix of admiration and awe. When it was over, the panel gave their feedback, mostly positive, with a few suggestions. Jamie looked tired but relieved. Walking out into the cool night air, I asked, "How do you feel?" He hesitated, then said, "Like I'm exactly where I need to be. Scared, yeah, but ready to keep going." I smiled, feeling proud in a way I hadn't expected. "I've got your back." Jamie looked at me, eyes shining, "And I've got yours." In the weeks that followed, our relationship found a rhythm. It wasn't always easy. Jam schedules, last-minute cancellations, the constant stress of balancing dreams and reality. But we made it work. We found joy in the small moments. Sunday morning breakfast at Marty's when he was off, quiet nights watching movies, texting each other food pics, and bad jokes to stay connected during crazy days. One night, a few months after that big dinner, Jamie and I sat on his couch, the city skyline glowing through the window behind us. He was curled up next to me, his head resting on my shoulder. "You know," he said quietly, "I never thought slipping my number into your sandwich would lead to all this." I laughed softly. "Neither did I, but I'm glad it did." He looked up at me with that shy smile and added, "Me too." And in that moment, I realized that sometimes life surprises you in the best ways, like a simple number tucked into a sandwich, turning into someone who becomes your favorite part of every day. That night on his couch, with the city lights flickering behind us and Jamie's head warm against my shoulder, I felt this quiet certainty settle in my chest. It wasn't fireworks or grand declarations. It was just real, like finding someone who fits into the everyday cracks of your life without trying to force it. And for once, I didn't want to push him away or hide parts of myself. After a while, Jamie shifted and looked up at me, eyes glinting with that familiar mix of mischief and something softer. "You know what?" he said, his voice low. "What?" "I've been thinking about something." I raised an eyebrow, feeling that spark of curiosity. "About us," he continued. "About how we've been juggling everything, and how sometimes I feel like I'm still holding back." I nodded slowly, waiting for him to go on. "I want to stop holding back. I don't want to hide what this is anymore. Not just because it's easier, but because I'm proud of it. Proud of us." The way he said it took my breath for a second. It wasn't just talk. I could see the weight of those words, the hope wrapped up in them. "I'm with you," I said quietly. "I want that too." We spent the rest of the night talking about what that might mean, introducing each other to friends, maybe even family down the line. It was scary and exciting all at once. I realized how much I'd been craving that kind of openness, but I'd been too afraid to say it out loud. Over the next couple of weeks, we started making changes. Jamie came with me to a casual office happy hour, and I met a few of his close friends when we went out for dinner. The way he stood by me in those moments, like we were a team, made my heart swell. It felt like stepping into a new chapter, one where we'd both stop shrinking to fit into our separate worlds. One Saturday morning, Jamie invited me over to his place for breakfast. I showed up to find him bustling around the kitchen, this time not just experimenting, but carefully planning out a spread. Pancakes, scrambled eggs with fresh herbs, and a big pot of coffee filled the air with warmth. "This is officially my 'I'm glad you're here' breakfast," he said, handing me a plate. We sat on the floor by the window, sunlight pouring in, and ate like it was the most important meal we'd ever had. Between bites, we talked about his upcoming internship at a local restaurant he dreamed of working at, and my plans to finally ask for a promotion at work. "I'm nervous," Jamie admitted, "but also kind of excited, you know?" I smiled, reaching over to bump his shoulder gently. "You're gonna kill it, and I'll be cheering the loudest." As the months rolled on, we kept navigating the ups and downs. Sometimes Jamie's workload was insane, and I felt like I was waiting more than I was seeing. Other times, my job stress spilled over, and I had to remind myself he was still in my corner, but we made it work. We learned how to communicate when things got tough, how to ask for space without shutting each other out, and how to celebrate the small wins that felt huge when shared. One night, Jamie surprised me by inviting me back to Marty's, not just as a customer, but as his +1 for a little get-together with his coworkers. I was nervous at first, stepping back into that familiar deli surrounded by people who'd watched him grow from a quiet clerk to a confident chef in training. But the way they welcomed me, teasing Jamie about his love sandwich story and sharing laughs, made it clear I was part of something now. Jamie squeezed my hand under the table, a silent thank you for showing up. Afterward, as we walked home under the stars, he stopped me. "I want you to know," he said, "that number in your sandwich wasn't just a bold move. It was me taking a chance, and I'm glad I did." I grinned, pulling him closer. "Same here. Life wasn't perfect. We had our moments of doubt and frustration, but we had each other, and sometimes that was enough." Looking back, it's wild to think how a simple sandwich run turned into the best thing that ever happened to me. Who knew that a slip of paper tucked between turkey and rye could lead to this? But here we are, still figuring it out, still laughing, still falling in love over and over again, one imperfect moment at a time. A little over a year after Jamie slipped me his number in that sandwich, we found ourselves sitting together on the rooftop of his apartment building. The city was quiet beneath us, just the distant hum of traffic and the occasional flicker of a street lamp. It had become our favorite spot to escape to when the world felt too loud or too complicated. Jamie pulled his knees up, wrapping his arms around them as he looked out over the skyline. "It's kind of crazy to think how far we've come," he said softly. I smiled, resting my head briefly on his shoulder. "Yeah, from deli sandwiches to rooftop talks." He laughed, that easy, genuine sound I'd come to love. "Who would have thought a sandwich could change your life?" I looked over at him, the way the city lights caught the edges of his face, and felt this swell of gratitude. For his courage to take that chance, for the late-night texts, the shared meals, and the quiet moments that made everything else bearable. "You know," I said, "it wasn't just the sandwich or the number. It was you being real, even when things got tough." Jamie turned to me, eyes shining. "Same goes for you. You stuck around when it would have been easier not to. That means everything. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that only comes after knowing someone deeply. It wasn't perfect, and life still threw curveballs, but we'd built something steady, a partnership rooted in honesty and patience. As the cool breeze brushed past us, Jamie squeezed my hand and said, "I'm still scared sometimes, but I feel lucky. Lucky to have you." "I'm lucky too," I whispered, leaning into him. And in that simple moment, with the city stretched out beneath us and no grand promises made, I realized that love isn't just about fireworks or epic declarations. Sometimes it's about showing up, day after day, choosing each other even when life is messy. Jamie smiled against my shoulder, and I knew whatever came next, we'd face it together. And honestly, that was more than enough.